Hello, hello. Welcome to True House Stories. I'm Lenny Fontana coming out of New York City. And this edition, and I say this special edition, I'm going for a special show here for a record label and two men that, when I say grinded and worked hard and discovered fabulous talent over 3 decades plus, is unprecedented. Check this out. This one gentleman, Andy Van, the good-looking disco guy, who has metamorphosized himself into Madison Avenue and so many different pseudonyms, also being a fantastic DJ, and his partner, Jon Coarse, who has excellent ears for picking out a great record, to doing a fantastic set, traveling the world, running a day-to-day record label. And here's the other thing. When I hooked up with them in Melbourne recently on my tour, they were telling me about how sometimes, as much as they're working together, they may even be competing against each other at gigs. So that's super cool as well. So it's vicious music, 3 decades plus in the making, two master guys behind it, Andy Van and Jon Coarse. And enough of me. I want to bring them right up right now so they can tell their story. So we're going right down into Melbourne live, right to the studio to see Coursey and Andy Van. What's up?
Wow, what an intro. I'm going to hire you as a publicist.
I found my new job. I work for Vicious. I'm on retainer. I'm agreeing to do the show.
No props.
I know you've been waiting 30 years to get in here. And we got you in. But thanks again. First of all, to say the least, there's not many labels that can say that. Okay, so congratulations on that, 3 decades plus to both of you. As a marriage, before I ask the first question, a marriage is a working marriage. How's this work for you two? Because it's a long time, to be in.
A long time, but I've always prided the way we do things, as in John and myself at the label, is we kind of think the same. So therefore, generally, I would say 90% of the time, John and I will go, this is a great track. And we don't need to know what each other thinks of the track. We know it. And generally we'll know the same direction. John might go a little bit more housey. Back in the day, I might have gone a little bit more electro EDM-y, or disco-y, but we're always on the same path, the same path. And that's been an absolute pleasure, because you're not stressing and arguing and going through issues. You're going onto the creative process and doing it, knowing that you've got your back supported by your partner in crime.
I mean, we'll debate thousands of little things, but the big picture commitment to what we do and what we like and how we want to do things, and our attitudes in applying ourselves to our own careers and to Vicious and to music and to DJing, it's really exactly the same. So when the big picture's on the same page, it doesn't matter if you have debates, arguments, conversations about, does this artwork look better, or does this artwork look better, or do we want this remixer or that remixer? We know that the reason we're asking those questions or pushing back or doing all that is because we just want a better outcome at the end of the day. So once you've got that understanding, you just don't have to worry about all the other crap that can get in the way. And I mean, we've definitely had, debates and arguments, and anybody in our office hears them all the time and laughs at us how we, go through things. But there's never been any ill will or intent with either of our successes, which have been individual at times, or our group successes with the label. So I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a question that's in my mind, and I think a lot of us are from old school to new school. New school's looking at it from a different scope, looking at it from TikTok numbers and things like that. Are you guys still playing DJ A&R, or is it more important for artists to have the big following of numbers if when you're looking at it from a record label standpoint?
Bit of both. I would suggest bit of both. Both of us DJ a lot, so I think DJing and seeing the reaction of 1,000, 5,000 people, is amazing, absolutely amazing. But then it's also amazing to see an artist put up a song and have 500,000 people loving it and commenting and saying, when's it coming out? So there's definite pluses and minuses to both of them. I would suggest sometimes TikTok can be too fast. Do you know what I mean? It's hot this week, and then 2 weeks later, or a month later, or even 6 weeks later, when you're releasing the track, maybe the heat's gone. So that TikTok mentality can be a little concerning in the music industry. But from a DJ point of view, good tracks last 6 weeks. You know what I mean? They can last 6 months. And
there's always been marketing around music. So, I mean, it's completely different format, obviously, because it's straight to consumer, and a lot of the time consumers driving it. But there's still campaigns around a lot of these TikTok things that seem like they're completely viral, but ultimately they're actually, very planned. So instead of maybe, 25 years ago, you release a record in the UK, you had to have, a Music Week advertisement, you had to have posters, you had to have record stores aligned to get the release date right and get the shipping. You had to make sure your distributor had the product in the stores. As Andy knows, when he had Madison Avenue, Don't Call Me Baby, he had like a hectic week of 100 interviews on radio leading up to the release date. So there was always things that were done. Just now they're done in a completely different realm, completely different way, completely different tools. But ultimately, it's about amplifying the story around a song. And I think if you look at it like that, you just have to be open to, adapting to a more modern way of doing things, which, to be honest, as a long-term old school kind of DJ, it doesn't come naturally to me personally. And that's why we've got people in the office that, are more attuned to that sort of stuff and making sure it happens.
And I'm glad you said that, because you're weathered like all of us are, and sometimes could be just a little bit jaded. It may sometimes make us a little bit sharp around where we say we're not hearing this, even as a DJ or not. And then we have to then say to the young, hey, all right, we'll give it a shot. Are you finding that as well? Are you saying, let me step back a little bit? Maybe
no,
I'm not.
Look, I think as an independent label, we've actually been always very forward thinking in how we embrace what happens. I mean, you go back to, 22 years ago, Don't Call Me Baby come out, right? Because of the record was so big and Andy's project with Shane was so big, particularly here in Australia, they got the cover story on Australia's Rolling Stone, which was a predominantly, rock orientated music media magazine, but obviously everybody knows Rolling Stone. And we got a 5-track CD thing on the cover to have 4 other new artists, as well as Madison Avenue, all on this CD. And some of the things we wanted to do, the publishers of those songs were like, no, we can't, we won't let you do it. We're not getting paid. And we were like, what do you mean? This is like launching brand new artists to a huge audience of people that don't understand this music yet. And it's a chance to get in there, and you're saying no because you're not going to get paid for a cover mount CD of a record that otherwise no one's even going to know about. And they were like, no. So with that, we were the first Australian label on Beatport. We were the first Australian label to do a compilation with iTunes. So our mentality has always been, we can't stop technology. I don't think we're jaded about technology at all. I think we're very accepting of, hey, this is how the world works. And, old school DJs whinging about whether or not, a DJ uses vinyl. We're like, the format doesn't matter. The way it's delivered doesn't matter. It's all about the songs, and it's all about making people know about it. So I think we're actually completely not jaded. I'm just saying from my personal, it doesn't come naturally, but I understand it has to happen.
Yep, for sure.
I want to make sure that was clear. Okay, now that you cleared it up, you guys are new age and you're cutting edge. So let's take it back for a second to when you were both kids. How does music find you both? Because there's always that beginning, you know? How does it find you, or you find the music?
Well, for me, it was the hip hop scene. So I kind of got into breakdancing and hip hop and that kind of movement early days. And I saw the movie Beat Street, which was obviously about, you know, hip hop culture, rap, breakdancing, graffiti, and everything around hip hop culture. I saw a DJ scratching in it. I heard it in the tunes that we used to breakdance to, and I was like delving in, what's this all about? That was my introduction.
And for me, I was 12 years old and I flew to Amsterdam, and my nephew, his name's DJ Marcelo. He was an iconic DJ in Amsterdam, and he gave me a whole bunch of cassettes. People may remember those. He gave me a bunch of cassettes, and I gave John a bunch of them as well. And they had this fantastic, at that time was funk, disco, and super early house music. I'm talking like just really cutting edge stuff that no radio stations were playing.
Not here, that's for sure.
Yeah, not zero stations, like literally zero stations in Australia were playing that. So it made a big impact on me, and it meant that I actually wanted to be a DJ because of how excited I got about the music. And part two to that sentence is also artists like S Express, Bomb the Bass, and Simon Harris. They were three artists back in those days that made a big influence on me because they were chopping up samples and literally putting songs together out of little
Cold
snippets.
Cut.
Yeah, Cold Cut was the other one, yes. And I collected them all. I've got like 20 versions of Simon Harris, Bomb the Bass, and you know, there was so many great tracks around the era of creating music out of samples. And for me, immediately, you know, which is I still do now 30 years later, it was so important and so influential in the way I started DJing and started producing music.
Guys, can you tell us at the time when you were body rocking and hearing all this new house music, what the demographic and the landscape of Australia was like at that time? Because people around the world in the Northern Hemisphere, Europe and America, especially like New York, we had a massive disco scene that actually translated into then dance music, and it always was going on. And we have also Latino and a Black audience and multicultural. But I do know that in Australia, it's a different demographic. And I know it's a rock nation. So you have to explain that, how you broke through.
Obviously, super rock dominated on the radio, and the dance music side of things was more Euro. So you didn't, I mean, the commercial disco, I'm sure, I mean, it was before my time, but I'm sure, you know, things like I Love the Nightlife, you know, ultimate commercial disco record, and Donna Summer, I Feel Love would have been played on the radio and would have been hits. But the underground scene, well, I don't think was anywhere near as developed. And the music that we first heard was a little bit more like the Euro stuff, as far as I would say New Order, Depeche Mode, that new romantic. That was the syncopated electronic music that probably we first heard, because it was a completely different culture. And, you know, artists like New Order and the Human League and Depeche Mode, etc., all got played on the radio here. So I think that was a big influence. I mean, and the other thing is, I mean, it's a funny story and it's hard to believe, but, you know, I remember the first time we went overseas, we went to a club and Todd Terry was playing, and we didn't know that Todd Terry was African-American. Now, you guys probably think, how could you not know that? But, you know, the name didn't say anything, and we didn't at the time associate house music with black culture, because we didn't have, you know, that.
Yeah, we don't have that here.
That culture in Australia. It's a very Anglo-Saxon kind of European heritage culture. So it was, especially at that time, and especially musically. So it was completely eye-opening once you started, you know, delving into obviously you knew that hip hop had its roots in, African America, but we didn't know house music because our house music experience was a lot of the UK stuff, and S Express and Bomb the Bass and Cold Cut, all that we've just mentioned are all English white people. So the culture of it was very different in Australia compared to, I think, the UK and certainly the US, where obviously, it was a follow-on from disco, wasn't it? It kind of house music grew out of disco, but
Totally.
I'll just jump in there. I'll tell you one story that I back in that time that John mentioned. Australia, and it is to a large extent still this way, we're a mishmash. We're a mishmash of American influences, European influences, our own Australian influences. And one problem which John highlighted is we don't have an African-American culture. We don't have a disco culture. We don't really have a funk culture. So back in the day, John and I worked at a club called Stone's Tavern, and there was this tiny amount of people that would dance to, Jocelyn Brown and, Jimmy Bo Horn and all of those sort of funk artists. And that was a very important time for John and myself because we were able to play funk music in an environment where rock music was 99% of the music that was played to general people's ears. And so I mentioned that change and how it influenced me, and I'm sure it influenced John as well.
100%.
And then as house music started coming in, we were like hugely influenced. John and I both would buy, everything from Marshall Jefferson, from I've got Future, Acid Tracks, all the Detroit music that came out, Carl Craig, all of that stuff we would buy on vinyl. Now, we wouldn't know the impact that it had in say, Los Angeles, Detroit, in New York, Brooklyn. We wouldn't know how it affected your crowds and how they would love it. We just knew what we would play. But I would play that music and people wouldn't know it. And one thing that I absolutely loved about DJing in Australia is people would come every week just to hear the music that John and I had purchased from overseas because they had no other way of hearing it. And it was an amazing time to be a DJ.
Now, two main imports happened in the mid-'80s that came to America from Australia. You ready?
Yep. They're going to be cheesy, are they?
Men at Work?
Yes.
And Paul Hogan.
Yeah.
The Outback. Everybody was like, oi, he sounds Australian. And that's what people remembered. And AC/DC.
Yeah.
We didn't know about Australians making dance music yet. It really wasn't cutting yet. It was like still a rock generation coming into the imports into American market.
Yes, absolutely. And we were that. That's, AC/DC was everywhere on the radio, absolutely everywhere. And so was an artist called Jimmy Barnes and Aussie Crawl. All those bands were everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And frustratingly for me, people would come up and say, have you got Jimmy Barnes while we're DJing? And of course, we're playing house music and funk and, a million miles away from Jimmy Barnes. No disrespect to Jimmy if he's watching this, I hardly doubt it. But it was not our scene. So we were pushing something. And that's one of the, pretty well the reason why we started Vicious. Back in those days, it was called Vicious Vinyl, hence what we were doing. But that's why we started the label, because we wanted to create a dance music label that just didn't exist in Australia.
So how did you two meet before this thing happened, before the label?
Andy walked past where a dance studio space where I used to do breakdancing and stuff, and he heard music which was like on the tapes that his cousin had sent him, and he was like, what the hell's going on here? I never hear any music like this. And
no, that's right.
There was a song playing, I don't know what it was. It might have been, it could have been Herbie Hancock Rocket. It could have been Buffalo Girls. I'm not sure what it was, but I remember and at the time I just started DJing, and I said, you should come to this club. So he come there, and I was doing like 8 till 9, and I ended up doing 9 till 10, and he did 8 till 9, and we were just the newbies on the block in this little club, an hour out of Melbourne, and we just had a musical taste and a kind of trajectory that matched. So we've been friends ever since.
Did you have any formula from anyone else around you that, because here on our side, we were able to see so many different labels and so many different DJs. You couldn't help but to have a schematic of some sort if you watched it carefully. Was there anything like that around there for you to jump around to grab from?
Ooh,
well,
a little bit.
Look, there was the house music scene was obviously hugely influenced by international music. So the import stores is where DJs were shopping for vinyl anyway. And basically the style went from, Euro disco like Male Stripper and So Macho and Fancy Slice Me Nice, which I'm not sure if you even know those tunes, but it went from this Euro disco, post-disco Boney M, and the records come in, and the DJs who went in and listened, the younger DJs, which we were at the time, were like, we love this house music thing, more songs like, we didn't even know really what it was. We're just, hey, this thing that goes Jack Your Body all the way through, love that tune, I'll buy it. And then we took it and we played it because we loved it. And there was no influence as a club around that because we were part of the people who were starting that. And once we started to DJ more in Melbourne as opposed to an hour out in the suburb where we both lived, we obviously then crossed paths with other people who were also catching that wave of music. And then we learned that there was, techno raves going on, and there was, there was a handful of clubs, like 4 or 5 clubs, of which we ended up DJing at 2 of those, say 5, regularly, that were breaking and playing this early house music sound. And there was, 20 DJs who were all into it and were all trying to buy the same records and were all going, oh, did you get the, so then we found this small network. And then from that, a group of patrons that also were like, we love this new sound. So clubs like Chasers, Chevron, Checkpoint Charlie, at the time, I'm trying to think of the Light Car Club on a Friday night, very influential. A club called Razor, very influential, with a DJ called Gavin Campbell. So there was definitely a scene, but it was very small and very eclectic. You could play a hip hop record like Paid in Full, the Cold Cut remix by Eric B. and Rakim, and 2 hours later or half an hour later, you could be playing S Express, and the next song after S Express could be, Strings of Life. It was just a complete eclectic taste of everything that currently hadn't happened before, all happening. So it was fresh styles of hip hop, Balearic, house, techno, acid, all kind of happening.
All on the same night. I'm not kidding. John is absolutely right. And it's always a mishmash. It'll always come back to that word where everything is mishmash, because we didn't have dedicated hip hop clubs. We didn't have dedicated Detroit house clubs. So we just put it all together the way we felt as DJs. And now, years later, people like Sergeant Slick say we influenced their music taste and them wanting to be producers and DJs because they listened to what we played. In some points, we had no idea what we were playing in regards to, is this a massive record in New York right now? Or is it a big record in the UK right now? We kind of knew, but people won't understand this. If you're 25, you'll be listening to us thinking, why don't you just look it up? There was no looking it up. There was no internet.
Wait. There was no internet yet? There was nothing.
Global? Absolutely nothing. There was a magazine that we got once a month. That was it.
What was that magazine called? Do you remember?
Mix Mag and DJ Mag were the 2 mags that we used to get religiously. And when we used to do trips to London or America, we went to New Music Seminar in, I think, 1994 or 95. And we used to have lists. So we'd buy the magazine, we'd make a list, and we'd take that list into our import record store in Melbourne, and we'd go, have you got any of these? And they'd go, oh, yeah, we've got this. This is coming next week, la, 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 la. We'd check out what we wanted to check out, buy what we wanted to buy. The music person would suggest stuff that they thought would fit with what we do. But when we went to Europe, we'd be in London for a week, and our daytimes was like record shop after record shop after Record Shop. It was like catch the train to Oxford, go to Massive Records where Joanna Massive was. That was a day shopping, going through 200 records, listening, going to the secondhand record shops in Notting Hill because DJs who got promos would sell the ones that they didn't like to there. And we went in there, and I remember us getting, Defected Records promos and promos of like US releases that were promoted in the UK that a DJ had sold that you couldn't even get at the record store in the UK. And we're buying it secondhand, and we're thinking, oh, we've got this, and we're ticking another record off the list. I'd come back with a crate of records in a week after being in London.
And we went to City Sounds all the time. And City Sounds is where Simon Dunmore started that shop. I don't know if he started it, but he was absolutely there in that shop. And that was super influential. And this was pre-Defected time for sure.
I guess it's just a level of enthusiasm that we had for what we were doing with absolutely innocent, no knowledge of what we were part of until you look back.
Because the driving force was you were DJs.
Yes. Yeah. And loved the music. That's the thing. We're DJs and we love the music. And no one, doesn't matter whether or not, I've always said this, I can DJ to 100 people or 10,000 people, and I can get paid no money or $10,000. Prefer the latter. But I do it because I love DJing and I love music.
And why? Because you love the people and you love the music, right?
Yeah.
And I think that flows through to the company, and it always has, in that, like 3/4 of our staff have been DJs of some sort, of some level. There's a lot of music people that have always been involved with us, even though we're a small label. The people who are here have always had a level of enthusiasm for music, and that's something that we embrace and we want. And I think one of the things that we've always said just in personal conversations is, as long as we're enthusiastic about music first, you can adapt the business to all the other things, but you've got to have that love of music and discovering songs and being excited about new songs and new artists to be running a label and to be DJing, to be honest. If you're not looking for music, that's in your realm, if you're not shopping on Beatport or TrackSource or going through some promos or searching for music somewhere, whether it be, like a new school site or some of those older ones that have been around forever, I mean, what are you doing as a DJ? You're just treading water and living on what you did before. So I think, I play a lot of old school gigs, don't get me wrong, but I still have a passion for hearing new music and hearing new artists and playing new music. And I think if you lose that, that's when you're really in trouble.
I know that. I get that. And the thing is, for a DJ in the bloodline, forget about running a business. The bloodline always was, what's the new hot track?
Yep.
Yep.
Who's got that new hot track? No matter how much we love our classics and all that stuff, we're still searching for that record that you go, damn it, this is hot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And DJs as well on that front, they're very transparent. DJs, by and large, play what they like. I mean, obviously at a commercial club, you are obliged to kind of keep an element of, if you're playing at the local pub, you're probably expected to play top 40 music. But I'm talking about on a club level, DJs by and large play what they like. They don't ever, I can't remember ever getting a record and then going, I'm not going to play this until I know who made it, what sex they are they gay or straight, what country are they from. We don't care. The record's hot, we play it. We find all that stuff out afterwards. And that's why the dance music scene is so fantastic on a level of like bringing communities together, because honestly, the people who run it, by and large, they just don't care about any of the shit that other people often try to separate stuff by. We're just like, is this a cool tune? Do I want to play it? Yes. Do the people who are in the club want to hear it? Yes. That's it. Let's go.
So let's say it like this. If we were running a mafia Cosa Nostra, it'd be first whack the guy, then ask questions later. That's how we handle music. Whack it first, then ask later. We don't care how it went.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we got that clear. I want to show this poster to everybody. And then I'm going to ask the question. See, this is the 30 years plus, okay, when I said to them 30 years of Vicious music. But here's what the question is going to be. 30 years ago, or 31 or 32 years ago when you were planning, what was the first record you found that you felt? And when you planned it, did it work out to the way that you dreamed it to be at first?
Well, the first thing I would say to that is the amount of planning was zero. There was no planning. It was.
No. Do we like this?
It was us, me and Andy seeing these magazines and this. By this time, the label started. We were thinking about it in '92. The first release was '93. By that time, early house music was well and truly on the radar. We were buying these magazines. We were setting up a little studio. We were seeing pictures of artists, and they'd have a synth or something on the cover with them, and we'd be like, "What's that? How do we?" And we'd go and find the synth, and we'd buy it and figure out how it worked, and try and make some music. And so we were trying to make music, and then
that went on for a few years, though. We were dabbling in creating music, buying a Juno 106, an Oberheim, a 909 drum machine, an 808, a 303, all of the classic machines. Half of them we sold, unfortunately, and we'd be very rich if we kept all the gear.
Well, we kept some of the best ones, I've got to say.
Yes.
And then from kind of dabbling in that, we ended up making some tunes. We thought, hey, let's do something with this. So at the time, there was me, Andy, and a guy called Colin Daniels, and Colin was working at a distributor in Melbourne that sold vinyl to record stores. So we a song called Witness of Strength we ended up doing, which was like a ravey techno song, which was us. And then when we did it, somebody else who was making music, a guy called David Walker, who's Ground Level, many would remember, who are old school, a song called Dreams of Heaven. He actually got in touch and said, look, you're putting out some music. Would you be interested in putting out more this? And we were like, okay. So we put that out. And then, we were thinking, okay, we're releasing vinyl. Let's look for more artists. And one of the big early releases was Mark James, a Melbourne promoter, very well known, Future Entertainment. He had Carl Cox coming over to play, and he said to Carl, do you want to work on a song together while you're here? And Carl was like, yep. And I think it was one of Carl's first ever Australian tours, if not the first ever.
It was the first, yeah.
So him and Carl and me went in the studio and we made this tune called Eternal by Eternal. I was doing the kind of technical programming and they were basically producing it. And that was kind of like a significant early release that got signed to Carl's distribution called Underground Level Recordings in the UK. And then the first compilation we ever had was actually with an American label. And they had this compilation called Vicious Techno compilation. That was literally
I'll grab it
what it was called. And it was like, we got an American label signing a compilation album of nearly all Australian artists making underground house and techno. It was quite surreal in a way to think that was happening in 93, 94. And we were just going with the flow, but there was no real planning. And the first time we actually made a profit as a label was kind of like 1997 or 98. Like it was a fair while after we started. And we just did it because we loved the music and there was other like-minded people who were doing things. But that's the
first CD. If I see if I can get it right there you go. The first CD that we ever did, and it was an album, and it had a bunch of at the time techno producers from Australia. People would wonder and look at us and go, "You guys made techno music?" But yes, techno was the thing at the start of Vicious. Techno and kind of housey. It's kind of like Strings of Life. Some people would say it's a techno record. Some people would say it's a house record. So at that time, it was that sort of sound. But it was a very exciting time for the label.
But yeah, I like what you just said. Almost 4 to 5 years with no income coming in on the record label side.
Yep.
You were working and grafting to build an empire, but not intrinsically. You were just trying to make this work.
Right, empire, not the right word, but anyway.
Oh, look, we our DJ, we were DJing, so we were lucky that when we got set up, as I said, the third person in the label at the time who's not involved anymore, he's actually the head of South by Southwest Australasia. Just a little side note there, but he's been very successful. He's still a good friend of ours, but he was working for a distributor called Mushroom Distribution Services, and Mushroom Records is one of the most well-known rock labels, I guess, in the world. And a lot of those artists that Andy was talking about before started with Mushroom. And while they didn't know a lot about dance music, the one thing they did have was this intrinsic kind of mentality about, hey, support independent music, help things happen and help things grow. And they manufactured all of our vinyl on an account. So they were behind the same amount of time that we were putting in time and effort and ideas and work and signing music and helping to promote it and working out how to do all that. They were actually funding the manufacture of vinyl and getting paid 6 months later, and then manufacturing the next one and the next one. And without them, we probably wouldn't have been able to go so long as well. So that was it lucky? Well, probably not lucky, because we made moves to meet and find those people, but it was certainly also an independent mentality about music that helped us at the start with an area that we didn't have experience in.
So would you have called that a P&D deal, press and distribution deal with them at the time?
Yeah.
At the time, we didn't even know what the word P&D was, but we certainly were very appreciative. Like John said, I don't think we would be here, or certainly would have had a monumentally difficult job, because they loaned us essentially tens of thousands of dollars to help us start Vicious.
And that's the thing, I think, in this day and age, music comes out and gets consumed and gets eaten up and spat out so quickly. But, back then, if you think about it, the process and the time, it was like, firstly, create the record. So you've got to have the equipment in the studio, like we talked about collecting. You couldn't buy a plug-in for $200. It was like a Juno 106 is $1,000. A TB303 is $500. A TR909 or an 808 drum machine is $1,500. So you'd have to buy all this equipment. You'd have to have it, make the record, record it, mix it down through an analog desk, have a computer that sequences everything and connects everything through MIDI, so all the instruments would talk to each other. Finish it, record it as a master. Then you had to get that master pressed onto vinyl with a test pressing that took, 6 weeks for you to get the test pressing back so you could listen to it.
In London.
Yeah, make sure it was okay. We pressed our vinyl overseas because we sold a lot more vinyl internationally than we did in Australia. We'd get the test pressing back. That's 6 weeks. We go, okay, yep, this is good to go. Let's get the first pressing done, 1,000 units. That's another 2 months. Then it gets shipped to record stores, and the distributor has to like it to ship it to the store. The person at the record store who's a music buyer has to like it. They have to buy enough copies to make it work. They then have to sell it to their DJs. The DJs have to listen to it and go, do I like this? Okay, I'll shell out, $10, $15 for it. Then that DJ has to play it and carry it to his set, her set, and play it in a club. And the punter has to hear it. And then the punter hears it and goes, they don't Shazam it. They don't hear it on their mobile phone. They don't save it. They have to be in the club enough to hear it enough to go up to the DJ and say, what's this song I keep hearing here every week? And then they've got to go to their local record store and ask for it. And of course, it's not there yet because there's only 1,000 copies on vinyl. And if that trend continues to go, eventually there's 20,000 copies on vinyl around the world. And then somebody puts out a CD, and then the consumer can finally buy it 10, 12 months later. So the process of A to Z on music back then was anything from 3 to 12 months before it broke on a commercial level. And Don't Call Me Baby, massive hit. Test pressings in January, Australian release in September, international release in November, international hit in the UK, May the next year. Like, we're talking about start to finish, a year and a half on that record. And it was obvious.
Let's be real now. This is called a true commitment. You have to be locked into the release. You have to believe in the release. You have to make a financial contribution. It's not like now where you can quickly put something up, and if it doesn't work, you can take it right down. Back then, you're already $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 on each release, maybe more, 30,000. Am I right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and obviously it's fantastic now. You can make a song and you can have it up on TikTok in 2 hours time. You can have a call from a record label because you've had 1 million views on the TikTok. That's a fantastic world to be in. But it was also a pretty amazing world back then to be making music and hearing Carl Cox play it at a festival to 30,000 people and know that all that blood, sweat, and tears eventuated into something. So because it was so much work.
And I do think that if you had like a shit record to good record meter in 1993, I think the percentage of good and bad would probably be pretty similar to now. The only difference is there might have been 300 vinyl releases in a week that a record store in London had the opportunity to purchase in 1993. And now the Spotify consumer has, 400,000 streams get added roughly a week to Spotify. Now, that's all genres of music and its back catalogue. How much of that would be dance music? But still, to get to the point, Beatport probably has 1,000 releases a week.
Oh, so I reckon more.
Totally.
Probably more. So
more than that.
Yeah, there's probably still the same percentage of good and bad, but there's a lot more good and a lot more bad.
Yeah, and the thing is, how much time do you have in a day to go through everything? And you get inundated with too much product now. And things that are really great get lost, and things that are not so great but look fabulous and pushed the right way come through. Kind of happened the same way back then as well, but a little different now. I
saw a fantastic TikTok of a person, and it was an image of someone, a DJ, and he had a really fantastic song, and he put the song up, and it said, got 400 views, and then there's a shot of an Instagram influencer, I won't say who it was, dancing to a song, being silly, and it says 12.3 million views. So, it's you would hope that your song is the one getting danced to by the influencer, but sometimes there's an amazing record from that young producer or that guy in his studio that only gets 200 views, and it's possibly a fantastic song, but it's a shame that maybe he doesn't get or she gets the accolade or the success that song deserves.
Yeah, and I think that also we're talking about how you accept new technology and how the world works now. We really don't lose any sleep over that, because that is how the world works.
Yeah.
And we're not sitting here as a label going, oh, I wish it was how it used to be, because we had our challenges then and we've got challenges now. It's just the challenges change. Making noise now for the records that you believe in is the task, and it's hard to do that. But it was hard to do certain things 25 years ago. So the challenges change, but the mentality is still find music we like, play music we like, put out music we like, try and understand where we're trying to get it to hit, where it sits in the world, have some reference point of who might play it, what DJs might play it, and then, if you've got to promote it through TikTok, or if you need to think about how it gets exposed on, Twitter or YouTube or whatever it is, then you think about it.
Right. So you just got to roll with the flow.
Yep.
So take us on the journey a little bit about the record label over the years. You found some fabulous talent, one of which changed the music scene completely, along with David Guetta as well.
I'll hand this over to Andy, but as a label, Andy talked about influences, and Australia being a mishmash of everything. And because of that, you know, in the true sense, a label like, say, Strictly Rhythm was a pure house music label its whole entire life. It may have dabbled with a more techno release, but basically it was a legendary house music label. Nervous Records is a house music label. Vicious is a dance music label. We have influences from so many places that we've had all sorts of different music. We've had techno, we've had trance, we've had progressive house, we've had, you know, Madison Avenue, Don't Call Me Baby is a pure house record. So, you know, so that's one thing that's a little bit different. And part of that is why we found an artist like Avicii, which Andy can give you the rundown of how that happened.
Yeah, so jumping on the genre thing again, which John just highlighted. So back in 2007, 2008, a thing which turned into EDM, it was called electro. And electro was a very hot sort of sound. And
especially in Australia. Actually.
Yeah, it was really, really big in Australia. And electro, back in the day, you know, if your listeners and watchers look it up, you can find early, you know, artists like Tiga, Dirty South, obviously Vandalism, which we were part of. You can look up what those songs were, and you can hear, wow, that was the startings of what is now known as EDM. And it was a fantastic time, very European influence. There was not much American electro coming out, from what I can tell. And at that time, we had great success with our artists, which was myself, a guy named Cam Denny, and my partner in crime, Cassie. We were called Vandalism, and we were touring the world. And at the time, we had some big club records, and I was just speaking in the office, we had 23 remixes for Ministry of Sound and various other labels, Positiva. So we had a massive amount of music that was flowing, and a promoter named Ash booked us into into a gig in Sweden and in Stockholm. And Ash was representing, or the manager of, a young artist at the time he called Avicii, also known as Tim Berg. And he said, I'd love you to hear some demos from my new young artist. No one really knew about him. I think he had sent a tape to Pete Tong, and he got some notice on that cassette. I believe it was a cassette or some sort of CD that he sent. And also Laidback Luke was helping him and guiding him a little bit on some chat forums online. But basically, he didn't have a label deal. And I heard the demos. And as soon as I heard the demos, I was like, this is fantastic, because electro was a big sound, but he was presenting something that wasn't a big sound, which was at that time, piano house.
How old was Avicii when you were getting these demos?
18, possibly 17. He was in his own apartment. I don't know if I sent you the picture of us in his apartment, but he was in his own little apartment. And I'm talking little. He had a bed, a desk, and a computer, and little, $20 speakers and headphones. And he basically was playing me these demos, and I immediately knew there was something great about them. They were melodic. They were beautiful piano melodies over house music. And I thought, no one's doing this sound. I want to sign this guy. I sent the demos to John and a guy named Lorne, and both John and Lorne were working at Vicious, and basically they immediately heard the demos and they were like, yes, this is great. This is really good music. And so we started releasing Avicii demos.
But quite, at its time, quite kind of underground, instrumental, kind of like early club music from what became the EDM scene. And at the time, we were enthusiastic about the music, but I don't think anybody had a concept of how much that style of music was going to break in America and the world on the back of that. I mean, because, electronic dance music had never really broken on a commercial level in America ever. Even when it come from there as house music, it was still not a mainstream thing like it become through the EDM era. It was really the only time that I can think of where, an electronic-based style of music become super powerful in the pop world and in the pop world of America and gigs and touring and all that. So we didn't know that was going to happen because that style of music was happening in Europe already. But definitely the one thing that I would say as soon as I heard the music as well is that all of Avicii's music's always had this melodic, this melodic quality to it that is well and truly hearable from the very first instrumental song he ever put out with us, right through to his commercial pop crossover massive hits. There's always been a beautiful melodic element to all of that stuff. And yeah,
Also, he always spoke to me about genres. He didn't care whether or not it was a country vocal or a pop vocal. I mean, he did a track called Street Dancer with us, which was a rap track. And we replayed the whistle. People would know Street Dance from the movie Breakdance. I believe it was Breakdance, or Beat Street, one or the other. And he did a version of that. He did a version of My Feelings for You, which was, an R&B record. And he didn't care about genres. And, one of his biggest hits in America was a country vocal over dance music. And people were like, this is terrible at the start. But then, of course, everyone embraced it and loved it. But for a while there, people didn't like it. And he was very, very, very much about making great music. And obviously, musically, he was brilliant. And if anyone wants to learn about him, that doesn't, maybe, more house people are on your channel, look up his creative process, because he was a genius, an absolute genius, because he just wanted to make great music.
It just happened to be that, I guess, because of his lifestyle and this touring and everything else, just took the best of him. It's a shame he's no longer with us.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, look, we were not involved with Avicii we did 11 releases with him. His first release after us was a little song called Levels, which 1 or 2 billion people around the world know. Whether we crossed paths with him after our deal finished, he was always friendly, always said hello. But it's a whole nother world that he went into. And I guess the same with the David Guettas of the world, the Swedish House Mafia. Once it happened in the US, it happened on such a major scale. And the US music market has always influenced the global music market even more. And considering that European dance sound was already big in Europe and many countries like Australia, once America got on board, those artists just went to a whole nother level of touring and, financial viability and opportunity. And I think some people can handle that. I mean, Tiesto's been living in that world as a DJ and a producer ever since he started. And, he can deal with it. He's toured the world, I remember we went, one of the first or second times we ever went to Miami Music Conference, I found a flyer with Tiesto's dates, and it was like 28 dates or something in March out of 31 days. And I remember looking at it thinking, wow, this is unbelievable. How this guy's DJing like a Monday night, a Tuesday night at a campus in America at a university. And that was in 1996. Some people can do it, but I just don't think, personally, I don't feel like Avicii's, makeup was made to deal with what he ended up dealing with versus his creative and music, absolutely. But everything else, without being super close to it from the outside, just feels like it was just all a lot for some people to deal with. And, unfortunately, the end result is that he didn't deal with it. So it's tragic because he's such a lovely guy, so friendly, so enthusiastic, loved music so much. And the testament from everybody who was even closer to him once he blew up, he didn't change on that front at all.
Yeah.
He stood there. He stood right there. Where do you go after Levels, as a record label, when you had that kind of success?
Well, I mean, we didn't have that record. It'd be a great problem to solve, wouldn't it?
Yes. We had everything up until Levels.
You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Where do you go? I mean, you help this guy get to there, and then he goes and does his thing, and you now have to pick up and do your thing.
Well, we did develop some great artists after that. We had some fantastic success with Australian success, I should say. Sorry, I've got a funny tooth, so I've got a lisp going on. We had great success with an artist called the Potbellies in Australia, and that was a few years after that. And, we had I think 3 top 10 singles in Australia, that sold hundreds and hundreds of thousands of copies, streamed millions of copies. And that was a very successful artist, but it was a few years after. So, we worked.
Yeah, but also as an independent label, I mean, we're no independent label in the world really. A little bit maybe now because things work a little bit different, but in those times, independent labels didn't compete with majors once the majors got their checkbook out. I mean, the advance, as we understand it, the advance for Levels was $500,000 for one song up front. Now, it was an amazing song, but as an independent, that would put our entire company at risk. We would be like, if we did have that much money at the time in the bank and we put it on one song and that song didn't work, our entire business of 15 years is over. So, you understand where you fit in the food chain. And when big players come in with a lot of money on an artist that's making commercially viable music, you kind of just go, hey, our time is up with you. We wish you all the best. Go and smash it. If you want to deliver us some cool club music in the future, come and see us, but you can't have a mentality as an independent label that you have to hang on to everything, because the way the world works is that independent labels develop music, and a lot of the time artists move on, or they move on in some way, shape or form to a different structure and a different deal. Now, obviously, as I said, I think in the current day and age, the independent thing is probably bigger than ever because, superstar artists have independent management setups where they run everything. Taylor Swift is a great example where, her team is running the whole lot, and then she partners with whoever she wants to distribute her music. And independents are probably stronger now than they were for a period of time. But we don't kind of look back on Avicii and go, oh, he should have stayed with us, like we were there from the start. You have this mentality that you are in the ecosystem always going to be the people that develop music, and some of that music, the artists are going to move on to different deals, and you can't do anything about it.
And that's pretty much that. That's a good way of looking at it. And the ethos of now, that was the 15-year point. So we went from now, year 16 to 31. Where does it take you from there as a label?
Well, a lot of it is always the same, not in a bad way. It's finding new songs, finding new artists that we can develop and work with. Sergeant Slick's a great example. He was actually working with us at the time of Avicii. He was making tougher music, more EDM, electro-based. But, as genres change and genres become more and more popular, EDM died down a little bit after a while. It was there for like 8 to 10 years. It's still there now, but it just was, you could see on Beatport, virtually every song was on Spinnin' or was an EDM track that was in the charts. Now, Beatport, for example, is a lot more eclectic and has a lot more genres in the top 100, which is fantastic. And so we developed our label for those next 15 years and developed artists and projects. And I've got a new project called Super Disco Club. John's been releasing music. We've got stuff from Sergeant Slick, an artist called Jolene Petch, Electric Disco. We just developed lots and lots of artists and continue to do that every day. Prior to this interview, we were, talking about new releases for new artists that are just young, unknown artists from different portions of Australia and different places in the world. And we just continue to do that because that's back right at the start of this interview.
And even leading back to what we were talking about before, as far as influences, because we're in Australia, we, as I said before, we haven't been purely one genre label for our whole life. And that's caused us some issues because some people can't get their head around, hey, I like house music. I listen to a record on Vicious and I hear Don't Call Me Baby. And then that was on a house music offshoot called Vicious Grooves, actually. But then they would get another promo from us and it would be an Avicii record, 6 years later. And they're like, what are these guys doing? They've completely changed. Whereas in Australia, we've always been thought of as just a dance music label that has eclectic taste and puts out lots of different stuff. Now we have a little bit more genre defined. Vicious is kind of house and disco house, and a tech house label called Exceed is tech house and tougher stuff. And then we've got an underground offshoot called Vicious Black, which if it doesn't fit into those other two, it potentially goes there. And we've got a pop orientated one as well called Extrovert. But we've always just put out music that we liked, and that electro thing was really big here. So we licensed, there's some international music. I remember It's Like That by Static Revenger and Luciana, which ended up being a really big hit around the world. We signed that record into Australia because the electro scene was quite big here. And we were the first country to have a top 40 single with that record. And we were the label that did it. And we've had great contacts with Dennis and Static Revenger and Luciana ever since. But it was just reflective of our scene and what was happening here, and us putting out club music that reflected what was happening here. And at times that was different to overseas. I mean, Dirty South was, in a way, before his time when he broke internationally. He started off making electro, and it moved into that more EDM type sound. And now he makes what I would call progressive house or melodic kind of house music. And the same way that artists have journeys, us as a label, we're kind of similar. And as DJs, our taste evolves. And because we're in an eclectic DJ market where we play lots of music from different countries, that also reflects what we sign. So we're kind of unique in that, you know, you couldn't imagine some of the records that we've put out ever coming out on Strictly Rhythm or Defected. And in fact, talking to Simon previously, from who started Defected, you know, he was always like very true to the sound of house music. And he never, ever wanted to deviate from that because he had a whole community that moved around that sound. Whereas our community in Australia moved around all of the sounds that we've put out. So we're kind of unique in our geography position that we've been influenced by so much music, and it's reflected in how we've released stuff and who we've signed.
Funny thing is, if you mention a genre, we've pretty well released it. Like, we've released hip hop tracks, we've released R&B tracks, we've released techno tracks, house tracks, disco tracks, trance tracks, drum and bass tracks. Seriously, virtually every genre you could mention.
So the ethos of Vicious is more like whatever makes you move, and we like it.
Yeah,
we're gonna roll with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as far as signing it, yes. As far as releasing it, we obviously have to be aware of how the world works and how it consumes music. And, you know, we can't just put out a drum and bass record, a house record, a techno record, and a trance record on and send it to the same group of DJs and expect that they're going to embrace us as a label. So our mentality of what we like is we like what we like, and we probably try and sign anything we like. How we release it has certainly changed over the years, and how we take it to the market. We have to be aware of the consumer at the other end, or the DJ, and how they would perceive it, because that's a different question. But what we personally like and want to do, yeah, we're pretty open-minded.
Okay, so here's the last final question. Is there another 30 years ahead, or are we going to become redundant and retire?
I don't know. Maybe AI will replace record label bosses, and you can just we can go and sit on an island and relax. But I don't know about 30 years, but hey, there's definitely another decade for sure, and we'll be enjoying putting out music and loving it. I mean, as long as we've mentioned this the whole way, as long as we love what we're doing and are excited by music, I think we're going to continue on. And there may be some young guys at the helm, and we'll go relax and let some young creative people run the label.
And we've also tried to never put the business in front of the music. So as long as that enthusiasm's there, you know, we'll keep doing stuff. If we lost enthusiasm for the music but still had the business experience, potentially, you know, new people are going to influence what we sign. And there's guys who work for us now that have got their own taste in music and their own influences, and we're obviously open to them, you know, suggesting artists that we should look at, and them getting involved in the creative process is all part of growing. And I mean, look, you know, 20 years ago, I said to somebody, by the time I'm 30, I won't be DJing anymore. But here we are, still doing what we do. And I don't think anybody knew the life that the whole DJ and electronic music world was going to have back in 1988, 1989, 1990. You know, no one could have predicted it. It's still the longest, I would say house music is the longest running genre that's maintained a presence. Even, you know, hip hop is obviously up there. It started, you know, first hip hop movement 1977. But I would say four on the floor dance music started with disco, and that was before hip hop. And four on the floor dance music is still prevalent in clubs today. So it's definitely got a lifespan that you never know when it's going to run out. So as long as we're into it, you know, we just keep doing it. And, you know, we never planned to go for this long at the start. So we certainly aren't going to plan when to finish.
So there's no exit. There's no exit plan. No yacht to go run off of. No place to run away to. It's get back in that office, turn on the machines, get the music going, right? Just keep it going.
True.
Now, guys, 30 more years. We're going to come back again with new technology. I'll check in with you again. And let's see if we can now go over it one more time before we all end up ending everything. But for now, I still love what all you do, both at, you know, as DJs, as producers, as A&R men. I give you utmost respect. You're definitely a trendsetters in your own right. You're also legends in your own right. You know,
like I said, the PR job. Let's go.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, legends too. You know, I mean, there's something to be said for that because you have experience and you're still here to tell the story. Not many of the others are. And on that note, everyone, thank you again for tuning in. And thanks for my friends in Melbourne for spending 30 years of their time with me because I know them a long time. I met them a long time. And thanks again, guys. Have a great day out there. And to all you around the world, thanks for tuning in to True House Stories. We'll catch you next time. Take care.